Chair lays out Conference Committee report on House Bill 928. The Secretary will read the caption.
House Bill 928 relating to state and local planning for and responses to drought.
Senator Hinojosa, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. As you know, we had a full debate and discussion on House Bill 928. A lot of questions were asked on the amendment. It was part of Senator Menendez during the Conference Committee and Senator Oreste, and there were discussions afterwards explaining what the amendment's intent was in terms of extending the date for funding some of the bonds that have been issued already, and I think it's time to just vote, up and down vote, on adopting, and Mr. President, I move that we adopt the Conference Committee report on House Bill 928.
Senator Menendez, for what purpose? Members, can we have order?
Thank you, Mr. President. I simply would love to be extremely clear about what the amendment does and doesn't do. I want the members to know exactly what it does. I want to apologize to everyone for having to do this today, especially my good friend, Senator Hinojosa. This is something that our water company, back home said that they thought they needed because they were having trouble with the signatures, and I want to just explain what this actually does. First of all, not that it makes a difference. Your bill passed the House just a few minutes ago at 136-8. This bill is only bracketed for Lee, Burleson, Guadalupe, Bexar County, Comal, Bastrop, and Caldwell. County governments and Regional are supportive of this, and the governor's office still has to review and approve this. If we do not get all of the signatures, they don't get to sell the tax-exempt private activity bonds that will increase the cost of this project to our ratepayers back home. The shall in the bill is actually giving more flexibility through more time, not less, and it's impacting this one project, and it is the protection that the ratepayers have by asking the development corporation to sell them because they need to get this sold so the project can move forward. It protects SAWS by locking in the longer time period. Current law requires them to close sooner than the 220 days, and you can see that in the law that's being amended. The bill just adds a new subsection, B1, to allow for 220 days. In order to get tax-exempt funding, the state gives an entity authorization to get a certain amount of tax-exempt authority. Then they give you a specific amount of time to close to continue getting the tax-exempt funding. This bill lengthens that time frame to 220. The fiscal agent of the project is Mission Economic Development Authority. Once again, I apologize to you, Senator Hinojosa. This was something that was dropped as an amendment on our laps. I hope that it does not impact your bill. It has passed one chamber. I understand that some of my colleagues have concerns. We've done this in the past in terms of Hurricane Ike bonds. We've not done this in the past with the water. This is specific just to this one water project, and it still requires the governor's review and approval for these bonds. And I'm just asking you to support my good friend in this amendment so that our ratepayers in San Antonio can get the better rate through the private tax activity bonds. And I will help and be here to fight any other future changes to this. This would be just specific to this one project. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor to any questions that my colleagues might have.
Senator Watson.
Yes,
Thank you, Mr. President.
What purpose?
Just to speak on the motion to adopt the conference committee.
You're recognized.
Thank you. And members, just briefly, I had not wanted to stand up and speak, but let me just say this about what we're looking at here. I understand, and I cast no aspersions at all to those carrying this or those that may want this to occur. But this involves a potentially major point of public policy and how we go about addressing and dealing with issues related to the financing of pipelines, dealing with groundwater, and crossing portions of our state. It is a matter of significant public policy. It is the type of policy that, frankly, I could stand here in front of you right now and probably make strong arguments on both sides as we begin such a discussion. But that means we should have such a discussion. It should be discussed by a bill being filed, by there being hearings, There being debate, discussion, perhaps compromise and thought going into it, and that did not occur. The final thing I would say about this is that it is not something that while it may be something that was done in the past with Hurricane Ike, I would argue Hurricane Ike was an exceptional circumstance. We're not dealing with such an exceptional circumstance. Instead, what we're dealing with is the next to last night of a legislative session on a major matter of public policy. So I just ask you, as you vote on this, think through how we ought to be approaching public policy, even in the last days, even when there are important items to individual members, and even when we want to get out of here. Thank you, members. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Campbell, you're recognized. For what purpose?
To address the amendment, sir.
You're recognized.
If Senator Menendez would yield.
Do you yield?
Absolutely.
Thank you. You know, I agree, Senator Watson, it would have been nice to have this come to us at an earlier time rather than the 9th hour. But for me, I stand with Senator Menendez on this amendment because I support it because I'm trying to get the cheapest water rate that I can for our constituents in San Antonio. I think it may help if you have a better picture, at least for me it helps, to know what the amendment is really asking. One, there is a water resource project. That project takes water from one county, includes 7, and gets to San Antonio. That project has already been vetted and decision makers, stakeholders have all agreed. So this amendment is not changing the actual project, but all projects have to be funded. So this amendment is simply addressing the funding. Now, what about the funding? And how do I get to the point where I'm concerned and I want the cheapest water rate for the people who have a water bill in San Antonio? Funding for this project will come from tax-exempt private activity bonds. Bonds for this project will be sold by an economic development authority. But in order to get the best interest rate, the best bonds from Wall Street, we need to have some flexibility, and that's where we're asking for 220 days. We're asking for an extension of time in order to have more flexibility to get the best rates for the bonds. Now, it's this better rate that will end up giving us lower water rates. Is that true, Senator Menendez?
Yes, it is, Senator Campbell.
So asking for an extension of up to 220 days gives us more flexibility, again, for this funding, right?
Yes, ma'am.
For the best bond interest rate we could get from Wall Street.
That's correct. And the governor's office still has to review and approve.
And that, too, members, was what I was going to just reaffirm. Final review of the bonds for a project, and this is $885 million.
Yes, ma'am.
The final review rests with the governor's office of economic development.
Correct.
Now, remember that I think there was a concern earlier that the judges would need to sign off. When you've got a project of funding of $885 million, you do want some certainty out there. Hence, that's why it's good that the governor's office has final authority over this. But keep in mind, while we're not asking for all the judges to sign off on the funding arm of this, they already signed off on the project.
Yes, the Post Oak Savannah Groundwater Conservation District has granted the permits. Correct.
So the project has already been agreed on. What we need now is funding. Now, do I think this would have been better to come earlier in the session, I agree with Senator Watson. But this is about just asking for extension of the time to get the best, to have more negotiation and flexibility to get the best bond rates. And we're asking that's really what we're asking for. So, we're happy to take other questions, but am I missing anything? Is there anything hidden in here that we're not being open and above board, Senator Menendez?
I think we've tried to answer any questions, and we'll continue to answer any questions as far as anybody has some. I think we've expressed what the sections do and what they don't do, and at this time, unless you have any other questions, I think we're ready to vote.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Menendez. Thank you, Senator Hinojosa. Thank you, members. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator, we actually have several people who want to speak, so. Senator Kolkhorst, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I want to thank Senator Menendez, my classmate in the House and again in the Senate, on your hard work on this particular issue. You fight for San Antonio so hard. There was some confusion that this was just a local project. Obviously, it does have statewide impact. The Post Oak Savannah Water District is in my district and Senator Schwertner's district. And then the pipeline crosses and traverses a wide swath of Texas, including some of my district. And I want to say that I'm not against extending the time. That part was fine with me. What troubles me slightly is Section 8, and more than slightly is, and with the county judge sign off. And I just have to say, Senator Menendez, no one works harder for San Antonio than you or Senator Uresti or Senator Campbell, Senator Zaffarini with her portion of having San Antonio. And we are not, I know that this project has been talked about for a long time. And Post Oak Savannah, there will be water that leaves my district. That's not what the no vote is about. It's really about Section 8 and precluding or depoliticizing this, as someone might have stated today, that I think that anytime you cut off local debate, it can do harm to future policies. So I want to thank you for your efforts in this. I know Senator Watson and I have talked to you a lot today on the floor. You have been straight up about it, and I appreciate the manner in which you go and represent your district, and I know that you'll respect my hesitations on Section 8 of the bill.
I do, and I'm glad that you're always someone that I enjoy working with because you have the same passion for your district. I do want to just reiterate that the impacts of this language speak specifically to this one water project. And so I think I might want to just say, I don't see that it would have a statewide impact, but I do agree that it is more than just San Antonio. It is it's the route of the pipeline. And you are correct. It does cut across several counties and several Senate districts. And so I do grant that, and I understand your concerns. Thank you.
Senator Perry, for what purpose?
Just a comment to the author.
You're recognized.
Yep. This didn't come through the Water Committee. And I think that says a lot about it should have, and I think that's some of the concern. I, like Senator Kolkhorst, have no problem with the time extension. That was explained to me. But I hear about depoliticizing, and that i.e. cutting off a commissioner's vote effectively. We need to remember those commissioners represent a body of people. And if they have not been able to get this done from the body of people and want the legislature to step in and effectively negate that voice, I think that's the underlying public policy here. Forget the fact that it's moving water. That's probably already been negotiated from what I understand about SAWS and their process. But there's a whole lot of other things going on here. But at the end of the day, if we're rerouting a voice because that voice could not be heard, that is setting a precedent for future pipelines. And just to remind this body, we had a grid study proposed in our committee, one that I was supportive of at some level to have that discussion, begin that process of what that looks like. It was kind of killed throughout the process because we couldn't get the votes on the floor. This is a pipeline. It is beginning that artery discussion. I believe that part of this debate's already been had as far as SAWS has gotten the approval. But pipeline and movement of water is going to be a discussion item for the future that needs to have its day in committee. And I feel strongly that it's something we as a state will do. It's something as a state we have to look at, but we have to get that right. So any part of the process on pipeline movement has to be coming through the legislature and not use the legislature as effectively a arbitrage or mediator to go around the political process that we all rely on local control on that issue.
Thank you.
Senator Fraser, what purpose?
I would like to be recognized to speak at appropriate time on this issue.
This is the appropriate time. You're recognized.
Thank you. Members, if you'd allow me to, I've been back Googling, making sure that I had my facts correct to share with you. Interestingly, this issue goes with San Antonio goes way back a number of years, actually all the way back to the mid-'80s when San Antonio was having water problems. The city decided that they should build a reservoir, and a reservoir was designed called the Applewhite Reservoir. It was designed that would take care of the future water needs of San Antonio. They went to the voters in 1991 asking for approval. The people of San Antonio realized that if they approved the reservoir, it might increase the cost of their water, and the people of San Antonio voted down Applewhite Reservoir, chose not to build it. That would have addressed their water rights that we're talking about today. In 1997, I ran for the Texas Senate. At that time, there had been a proposal been floated out where they were attempting to put or pass legislation that would run a pipeline from San Antonio into the Colorado Basin. They were attempting to access water, vote to pull water from the Colorado Basin to send it to San Antonio. I ran my entire campaign. My campaign is I oppose the San Antonio hose. I printed bumper stickers all through this part of my district. People had bumper stickers on their cars that said, I oppose the San Antonio hose, because in 1997 they were still trying to do what the voters didn't do in 91. What we're seeing here today is a continuation of that. San Antonio, rather than looking for their developing resources in that area, now are moving to Milam County. They're attempting by this legislation to go through 7 counties with a pipeline to go back into San Antonio. They have a right to do that if they can get it approved by the Water Conservation District. But very carefully, whenever we designed the legislation, we said that if you're going to move water from one county to another, you've got to get approval of everyone along the way. There are 7 county judges that have to approve this, including the county judge of Milam County. The fact that we're coming at this late date and attempting to ram this through at 9:22 on the last night of the session on a bill that not only never got a hearing, it was filed and never was heard in the committee. I think what we're doing is really, really bad public policy. I think, as Senator Kolkhorst said, we're setting a precedent here of something. It's a place we don't want to go. We have put in place legislation that clarifies on groundwater the way it'll be treated, and the fact that we're trying to supersede that by statute on the last night of the session, I think this is really a bad place to go. I'll be voting no. I would love it if the rest of the members saw this for what it is. It is a taking where we're trying to move through 7 counties, and I think it's inappropriate.
Senator Schwertner, for what purpose?
Speak on the bill, please.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I see this issue similar to Senator Fraser. This is not just a continuation of Texas water politics, but this is the future of Texas water politics. This is, at the end of the session, maneuvering that has not thoroughly been vetted through the legislative process. Senator Eltife, Senator Nichols, Senator Creighton, how would you like this bill to be one in which allowed for the interbasin transfer from East Texas to West Texas? Or Senator Seliger, how would you like this to be a bill that allowed for the transportation of water from the Ogallala Aquifer to Dallas-Fort Worth? This is not right to be passing this late in the session. Furthermore, it impedes and upheaves is upheaval of the local control issue that Senator Fraser spoke so eloquently about. It is important for citizens in those counties to have an input, not just through the Groundwater Conservation District, but through their elected officials, through their county judge. And this amendment to this bill allows that local input to be superseded. It is wrong for Texas to be heading down this path this late in the session. These issues will become more prevalent in this legislative body over the ensuing sessions, but we should not be moving this direction at this hour in this session. So I'll be joining Senator Fraser and Senator Kolkhorst and many other individuals that will stand for local control, that will stand in prevention of the taking of water resources from one area of the state to help out another area of the state without the true vetting that needs to occur before that is allowed. So members, I hope you will see that issue with me and vote no on this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Bettencourt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Any questions of the author of the amendment?
Absolutely. Yes.
Senator, how long have we known about this amendment?
This amendment, let's think about this. I put this amendment on, my good friend Senator Schwertner allowed me to put this amendment on his cruise ship. And so I had these two amendments on that bill. Correct, but you allowed them to go on the way out there, so that's the first time I knew about those amendments.
You know, Senator, I have great respect for you and Senator Hinojosa, who's been our Senate Pro Tem. And I want to say that, members, this is 83% of $1 billion. This bill should have had a hearing. This is a water authority precedent center. And if we are moving across 7 counties, Senator Fraser, you're right, there's a lot of people in between that would have come to that hearing and we could have heard them. And with all due respect to the senators involved, I want to say that SAWS is taking a buzzsaw to the political process that's been established already in the state. And that buzzsaw is not what we want to end this session on, because this water rights and water water movement from basin to basin is going to have to be an extremely well thought out and honed public policy of this state. So I urge the members not to vote for the SAWS buzzsaw tonight, but to vote no on this report. Thank you, Mr. President.
I don't have any other lights. Anyone else to speak? Senator Hinojosa to close.
Thank you.
Sorry, there is. Senator Campbell, do you wish to be recognized again? You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I appreciate the comments of my fellow colleagues and most certainly respect them very much. But I rise again to just say, even though it's coming at the 9th hour, this amendment is not about the merits of a water resource project. That has already been decided. I'm standing up trying to get the lowest water rate I can for my constituents and looking at funding for the project. Again, the project's already been approved of. Looking for the funding, if we can get the best bond rate possible, then the taxpayers, then the water bill for my constituents would be lower. So members, I ask you to remember this is simply a funding amendment. The project has already been decided, and trying to be the most fiscally responsible senator for my constituents, I do ask your support for this amendment. It's about funding, and I sure appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Senator Hinojosa, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, members. I think we've had a full debate on this issue. While I disagree with some, I agree with others. It is drawing a lot of debate, a lot of opposition, and sometimes towards the end of the session, we add amendments to legislation that is non-controversial, but it seems to me that this particular Conference Committee report does include language where there's not a consensus. So, Mr. President, I would like to pull down the Conference Committee report at this time.
Senator Hinojosa moves to pull down the Conference Committee report on House Bill 928. Thank you, Senator. Is there objection? Hearing none.